Greetings and salutations to all of you lovely, fluffy, non-fluffy, equally lovely, beautiful listeners out there. I'm going to come out and say it. I did not prepare for this. And it's amazing. You can have multiple notes for a podcast, or you can have multiple points you want to make. But in this case, I don't really have anything. I don't have any notes. I don't have anything prepared like I normally would. But you know what? We're just going to roll with it. This is the entire ad-libbed podcast. I'm just going to say whatever comes to mind. And sometimes that's good, especially when you're in a situation where you need to just talk or you need to just get something out. And that's kind of what I've been doing over the past month and some change in therapy. It's imperative that the client is the one who is directing the narrative in therapy. And you want to have, and this is in the context of therapy, you want to have a therapist who is willing to listen, willing to hear you, but also is hopefully going to help you in whatever points you're making, even if it's just gibberish, right? And you want a good listening therapist, and you want someone who can sort of capitalize on what you're saying, but also is not afraid to tell you that you're being ridiculous or that you're, thinking in ways that are unhealthy, right? So there's a very, very good dynamic between the two. So first I'll start off talking about this week. It has been sort of a low week. I've not done a whole lot. I've been streaming and the usual stuff, working and whatnot, and work itself is still work. It's not much different than what I've been doing. But however, there has been a development at my workplace. I had a conversation a couple days ago with one of the management team members who wants to see me move up. And I've talked about this before, but they want to see me move up in the job that I have. And they presented it to me in a way that was opportunity to grow, opportunity to make more and do more with what I'm already doing, right? As redundant as that sounds. So I'm kind of at a split decision here of what I want to do. That is, as many of you know, I had an interview with a place that is going to allow me to work in my field that I went to school for, or I can stick back at this current job and move up and pursue a greater opportunity there, and also make more and, see more of what my potential is, right? So I decided, okay, this is where contentment comes in. This is where acceptance comes in. I had to take into consideration this conversation that I had with management, and I had to also consider the opportunity that I will or may have at this new job, right? And I've come to the conclusion that I am indifferent. As weird as that sounds, as cryptic as that sounds, it's true. I've decided, my decision is I am perfectly content with taking on this new job if it comes to that, and if they decide to have me. And I'm also content, and I've accepted that I may be sticking at this place that I currently work, which both decisions are good. They're positive. That's the main thing to consider, is when you're weighing options, what kind of pros do you have with a transitional phase, right? And the pros in both cases, both scenarios, is that I will be making more, and that I will be in a more senior role than I was originally, right? The cons stand with the pros, that the con being I'd have to transition jobs with the other one, and I'd have to, reinstate everything, insurance, 401k, all that adulting stuff. And it's also a new environment to get used to, and, maybe the work isn't what I thought it was. So those are all cons. And the con with my current job is I'm still at my current job, having to continue to do the same job that I'm doing with more responsibilities, right? So there's always cons with pros, and you have to weigh both of them. But in this case, both the pros and cons of both scenarios are just that. They are the same. In a weird sense, they are the same. And I have to decide, and I have decided that either one is going to work. I have to make either one work, right? So that's kind of where I'm sitting with my current employment. And I'm okay with that because both of them have opportunity and both of them have room for growth and both of them have a good place to be, right? A good environment, so to speak. So that's kind of what's been happening this week. I've been kind of given these options, as it were, and I'm okay with both options. So I know a lot of us don't tend to have that opportunity or tend to have those decisions that we like to make or have to make. But in this case, I think it's something to run with. If you're ever, the takeaway here is this: if you're ever in a situation like this, weigh the pros and cons, ask yourself the positives of both sides, and do not, by any means necessary, give into cognitive dissonance. And that is, we've talked about it before, the unyielding and unnecessary tailspin that we put our minds through when it comes to a decision, like, well, which one do I do, right? There's never good results that come from cognitive dissonance. It only puts us in a further mental hole than we ever intended, right? So I think the main part of that being obsession. We don't want to obsess about a decision. Instead, we can decide, and in a weird way, we can decide not to make a decision, or we can decide that both decisions, whichever one plays out, is okay. And I think this is a butchered quote from one of the Stoics. I can't remember exactly which one it is, but you can look this up. There's a quote from one of the Stoic philosophers that says, in some way, you have to make it okay in your mind. You have to make a scenario or a situation okay in your mind, right? So if you're dealing with something particularly serious, like let's say grieving, for example, it's okay to grieve. Like, by all means, it's okay to mourn the loss of somebody. It is okay to take as much time as you need to process it and to, listen to your heart and do what you need to do with the grieving process. As it's been said, there is no should in grieving. There is no should. There basically is no requirement in breathing. Well, there's a requirement in breathing. You breathe in and out oxygen, carbon dioxide. But no, sorry, word mess. No, there is no should or requirement in grieving. You go through it the way that you should go through it, and the way that you need to, however long that takes. And there's also no time stamp on grieving. Like, even after a few months, if you're still feeling that grief, then continue to process it, continue to meditate on it, continue to do your best with it, because there's no other way that you're going to be able to make it okay, if that makes sense. So eventually, down the line, however long it takes, depending on the person, and again, there's no timestamp on it, but eventually, with grief, we take the time that we should, and then we get to a point where we can accept it. We can accept this is the reality of the situation. This is the reality. The person is no longer with us. And we can feel a sense of contentment in that says, I am sad that they're no longer here. I am sad that I don't get to interact with them anymore. I'm sad that I don't get to talk to them. But this is part of life. And maybe one day I'll see them again. Maybe, they're at rest now. However you can make peace with it in your mind is making it okay. In some way, we have to make it okay. And no matter how long it takes, we have to make it okay. Another example, and I know I'm kind of harping on this, but again, we're going off script here. So another example comes from plans this weekend. For example, I have been presented with multiple opportunities this coming weekend. It's because it's the weekend before Halloween, so there's usually a lot of stuff going on, right? There's, get-togethers, there's parties, there's this, there's that, there's the other, there's opportunities, and there's, plenty to be had with the Halloween season, right? So one of the decisions is, do I stay at home and spend time with my local friends and have a good weekend with them, or do I drive 2 hours south and have another get together there and enjoy my time there with friends that I have in that area? And I have not come to a decision yet. I am doing my very best, and believe me when I say I'm doing my very best to not give into dissonance in this. But I have had, and I'm having to, still working through it, but I'm having to make the decision that no matter what happens, no matter which path that I go, whether that is to stay at home or whether that is to drive 2 hours to see other friends, either way, it's going to be a good time. Either way, I'm going to have fun with friends. Either way, there's going to be no regret on whichever decision I make, because when it comes to committing to things, you have to make a decision. When it comes to should I stay or should I go? Well, one of those decisions has to be the decision, or you can do nothing and have no fun at all, right? That's the third that we don't often see, is well, I could do this or I could go here, but the third option is I could do nothing. I could just stay at home. And, that also plays into, well, I don't want to upset anybody. Part of that is being honest, being honest about your intentions, telling somebody, hey, I'm conflicted. I have this plan, or I have a couple plans, but I'm not sure what to do. And I know this isn't a big life-altering thing. It's not a huge change in, how quality of life is going to be, right? The only decision is spending time with these friends or other friends, right? That can have quality properties to it, quality of life properties to it, but it's not life-altering, right? And it's amazing how we oftentimes will put ourselves through that agony of just, how do I go about this? When in reality, we can look at it. We can look at both ends from a big picture and say, well, no matter what I do, it's still going to be a good time because I'm going to make it a good time. And that comes from another Stoic idea that I read recently. It's oh man, I just lost it. Hold on. It was in my little quote book earlier this week, but basically, and I'm butchering this, I believe it was Epictetus, if I'm not mistaken, who said that we as people, it is not the thing itself that is causing us to react, whether that's positively or negatively. It's not the thing itself that is causing the reaction. It is the conjuring of our thoughts and our own response, whether we get upset or not, or whether we have a positive reaction or not, excuse me. So if something bad happens in your life, it's not necessarily the thing that is causing you to be upset or causing you to be maybe discontent or whatever. It is whatever thoughts or initial reactions you have to that thing that is causing this dissonance, as it were, or this this negative connotation of it. So, this is an example that many people have used over and over, but I'm going to use it again because I think it's pretty effective. Let's say you're at a stoplight and you're just sitting there, going about your business, not doing anything unlawful. And then in less than 2 seconds, bam, somebody rear ends you. What is often our first reaction? Oh, great. I can't believe this person. Why would they do that? Are they drunk? And it just like we start conjuring up these thoughts of like, this is the person's fault, because it is the person's fault. But what is the reality of the situation, right? In that moment, we are thinking, I can't believe this person. How could they do this? What, did they have a vendetta against me? Am I like an open target? Did they not see me? Are they, we can even go as far as to say, like, are they blind, right? And that right there is already, it's a negative connotation that we're putting on that person, when in reality we don't know the full story, right? So what's the next thing? We have to put on our hazards, or our blinkers, whichever part of the world you're from. Put on your flashing lights, and you got to get out of the car, and you have to assess the damage, and you have to confront this person who just rear-ended you. Now, again, initial reaction, we could get out of the car and immediately start yelling, like, what's going on with you? How could you do this? What's wrong with you? Da 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 da. And then we just go on and on and on. We haven't even introduced ourselves. We haven't even, which is sounds kind of weird in a car crash, but that's kind of the idea. Is like we haven't even gotten out and assessed the person necessarily. All we're looking at is the negative, the big negative that is happening right now. They rear-ended my car, and that is the story we already told ourselves. There's already bad things in our mind. And if one of those things happens to be true, like maybe they were texting, maybe they were under the influence, maybe they didn't see us, then that's called confirmation bias. We're already confirming what we thought, like, haha, I'm right. I was right. So I am clearly in the right here with what I thought. But we still haven't, in that moment, considered the other person and what they may be going through, right? There could be other elements involved, like maybe the person's brakes did not work at that moment. Maybe they were blinded by something, some other element, like maybe they got cut off by somebody and they had to get in the lane real fast. So it's actually that other person's fault that cut them off, right? Maybe they misjudged distance because they have really bad depth perception. Maybe the road was slippery. Who knows? There's a lot of other elements at play, right? But the point is, whether, despite the accident itself, like putting that aside for a second, the point is we have conjured up this idea and this story that happened in less than 10 seconds in our mind. So that is what is truly upsetting us, is the story that we told ourselves. And when it's confirmed in bias, then it just justifies our feelings already from that point, right? So we never really, at least most of us, we never really take the time to assess our thoughts, our feelings, our initial reactions, and our initial sort of like forefront. I would say the initial forefront of the situation, right? So with this weekend plan stuff, my reaction, I will be honest with you, like I said I would be. My initial reaction to both scenarios of should I stay home and be with these friends, or should I go off to another city and be with those friends? My first initial reaction was, oh my gosh, I don't want to upset anybody, right? When the reality is, whichever decision that I make, whether it's going or staying, somebody is going to be disheartened, upset, or maybe just disappointed that I'm not there, right? It doesn't matter. Either one, either way, somebody is going to be disappointed. Somebody's going to be disappointed that I'm not present in that moment. And that's hard, Also, these things, this scenario in particular as well, these are things that I could not control, right? I can inherently, and I can realistically control my decision of what I do, but both things were out of my control, right? So I was thinking about it today when I got some messages and like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is going on this weekend too, right? Both situations were out of my control. There just so happens to be these things happening all in the same weekend, and I cannot be present for both of them, right? So it threw me for a loop because the decision was being pushed upon me. I did not put myself in this scenario. They were pushed upon me, and that's nobody's fault. It just so happens that these things were all happening at the same time, right? So I have to accept, and I've had to accept, that there are going to be people who are upset, and there are going to be people who are unfortunately like disappointed with my decision, whichever one it is, right? But in this case, there's really no avoiding that. And talking about the third scenario, if I do nothing and just stay home, then everybody's upset, right? So there's no winning when it comes to the situation. It's in a sense, it's like Murphy's Law. And if you'll excuse my language for a minute, it is the case of damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? Also, I want to apologize for the blowing sound in the background. That is my heat. I have caved and I turned on my heat because it is getting cold here. Neither here nor there. Anyway, so that's the situation. It is damned if you do, damned if you don't. And, damned everybody if you do nothing, right? I would add a third caveat to that. So at this point, we may be thinking, okay, well, what's the ethical decision? To upset the least amount of people as possible. Well, that is a case in this decision of this weekend, right? Now, granted, if I were to stay in town and go about hanging with the friends here, that would mean that there are less people who are disappointed in my not being at the other place, at the other city, right? However, if I go to the other city and then I leave the friends here, then there's more people who are upset or disappointed, right? So that right there could be a tell. It could be a way to influence my decision. But at the same time, there's still going to be people upset. Like, it doesn't matter the number of people. It's still people who are going to be upset, right? And also, like, some people, I've talked to a number of people about this type of thing over the years, like the damned if you do and don't scenario, right? And I've had a number of people tell me in the past, you should go with your first decision. So, like, if let's say I made a plan initially to go out of town, then I should stick with my first decision because they were the first ones who came to me and they were the first ones who said, hey, can you make it? Can you be here? Whatever. Then you should go with your first decision. I agree and disagree with that because plans can change and, scenarios can change. And it is true that you should, keep your promises. That's for sure. However, I also want to say that there was no set in stone promise of either one, right? I said, okay, I plan to do this, right? I'm planning to do this with the possibility that plans can change because we all know that plans can change, right? So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now as I'm deciding which one should I do, right? And I've reached out to a number of people for advice, and I'm going to be honest, in this particular scenario of this weekend, I haven't had a good answer. I've sought after support, and I've sought after answers, and what should I do, and nobody has really given me a good answer. And again, that's okay. That's nobody's fault. They're there to be supportive, which I do appreciate, but I'm not there asking for which one should I do, right? I haven't blatantly asked which one should I do. I've asked more or less what do you think of this, right? And people have given me their thoughts and I've considered them, but there's no you should do this or you should do that, right? So yeah, as I kind of process through this, I'm just letting you know that the point being, and the takeaway here is I'm not letting cognitive dissonance win. I have decided that either decision, there is going to be consequences, because there will be consequences with either decision that I make. And though they may be sad, they may be upsetting, they may be particularly, the aftermath of it could be, oh, I wish you were here. Really, that's what it is, right? So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm making peace with the fact that somebody in either scenario is going to be upset, and there's nothing I can do about it. Only the best that I can, right? Which leads me into something that we've been talking about in therapy this past week, and I think it's a really good little introduction to talk about. So part of cognitive behavioral therapy, which is what I'm in right now, it's the type of therapy that I have with my therapist right now, is going through what are called doubt labels, right? And this is like an OG scale when it comes to cognitive behavioral therapy, because it talks about it kind of gets into the mind of the client as to what they really think about themselves, right? So during the session, I was presented with a number of words, and you can try this too if you want to try it just for fun on yourself. I would just Google like cognitive behavioral therapy doubt labels, and you'll get a whole list of words. The words are meant to garner a reaction from the client, right? Usually in a yes or no question. So, for example, you could use a word like unattractive, and then the client would say yes or no. Do you think you're unattractive? Yes or no, right? The next word would be, do you think that you're underperforming, or do you think you're inferior? We could say yes or no question, right? And then one of the ones that I thought was pretty interesting was they, mind you, this is like OG psychology, so there's going to be words that are kind of outdated, right? There was a word that was presented to me that kind of caught me off guard. I was like, oh wow, what do we mean by this, right? If you all remember the word to describe people, like let's say 50 to 100 years ago, the word to describe someone who is mentally unsound, or we'll call it neurodivergent, right? You know the word I'm talking about, the R word, that word, yeah. Rhymes with leotard, right? You know what word I'm talking about, right? That was one of the words that was presented to me, and my therapist was very good at explaining this is a more socially constructed word, and not in the word, not a word used in a clinical sense. So, you know, when someone like back 50 years ago, when someone was considered neurodivergent, they would often say the term mentally leotarded, right? See what I did there, right? Mentally leotarded. Okay, so I'm not gonna say the word because I think it's very disrespectful, but that was the point of that word, was how that word is often used in a social setting. Like when someone does something stupid, or does a faux pas or a social blunder, they will say about themselves, "Oh my gosh, I'm just so leotarded," right? Yeah, it's kind of funny the way I'm comparing the words, but anyway, you get the point. You've been in a scenario. I know you have. Like you've been in a scenario, if you're listening, of a group of friends, and somebody does a social blunder or does something particularly not very smart, and then they say that about themselves, or they talk about a movie or something musical or something pop culture-y or whatever, and then they use that word to describe it. You've been in that scenario. I definitely have many times, right, to describe something. So anyway, that was one of the doubt labels, and used in a social setting, and I answered no to it, right? So no, I don't think that about myself. I don't. But like when it came to words like unattractive or inferior, I said yes to them. And this is a quick fire test, right? So like, don't think, just answer. Like if you're presented with the word, let's go. Another example would be slow, right? Are you slow? I would say yes or no, and then it was a quick fire yes or no. I said yes, but there's a plethora of words to use in CBT, right? And that is an example, right? Those are some examples of what doubt labels are like. So the reason they're called doubt labels is because it is often conflated with self-doubt. Like these words are often conflated with self-doubt, right? And what it does is it gets in like I said, the client's psyche as to what they truly think about themselves. And are they happy with themselves? Are they comfortable in their own skin? Do they feel like they are effective, or do they feel like they're, what's the word I'm looking for? Do they feel like they have maybe imposter syndrome, and there's a whole lot of layers that goes with it. But I thought it was interesting. Like we went through probably 30 words, in doubt labels, and I got a lot from it. And then what happens after that is you unpack them. So you go with the yeses and the nos, and you take the negative ones, like the ones that say like, okay, do you have imposter syndrome, or do you feel like an imposter? If I answered yes, then we would have to unpack it, right? And that's what we've been doing. So we got through a few this past week, and we're going to go through more as the weeks go on. It is an ongoing process to discover your own doubt labels, but it does highlight a lot of what you as a person think of yourself and what you truly believe about yourself. And I think that's all in all, it's a very healthy way to bring self-awareness, have self-awareness in your own mind, and truly see the picture of what you think of yourself. Because at the end of the day, if we're not happy with ourselves, then how can we expect to make others happy? And it happens. I've been in that position before. You can make others happy and not be very keen on yourself or be very happy with yourself. You can put a lot out there and you can be the best that you can, but you can still think of yourself as, add any label you want, like inferior or, depressed or anxious or whatever, right? It happens. But I think a good, healthy way to look at yourself or to perceive yourself is definitely important, right? My dear and sainted mother, who I've mentioned before on this podcast many times, love you, Mom. She used to say to me all the time, bring your best self forward. Bring your best self forward. And that's hard for us to do. Like, that is a hard task if we're being honest with ourselves. It is hard to bring our best all the time because we get tired, we get irritable, we doubt ourselves. There's your doubt label. You doubt yourself, you doubt your skills, you doubt your abilities and things, and it can just leave you in a place where you feel like you're no good to anybody, right? And I'm here to tell you right now that those doubts that you have, absolutely not true. Because the way that you may answer to your own doubt labels is not how other people see you. And it also works the other way. Like if you answer yes or no to, let's say, unattractive, no. Do you think you're smart? Yes. It can work the other way in the sense that you can inflate your own ego, right? You don't want that. You don't want a big ego. You want something that is a good balance. Like you want to be confident and you want to be collected and you want to be, sure of yourself, but you also want to have humility and you also want to have a serving personality. Like you want to serve and you want to be there for people at the same time while also maintaining your own autonomy, right? So I know that was a lot, and again, we're going off script, but these are the things that have been on my mind. And as a matter of fact, I do have something that I want to share with you today that I think will be very good for you to think about. I mentioned it before, but I get these quotes every single day, and a lot of them are Stoic. A lot of them are Stoicism centered. But this was the one from today, and I want to read it to you now. This is Marcus Aurelius. And he says, I can control my thoughts as necessary. How then can I be troubled? What is outside my mind means nothing to it. Absorb that lesson, and your feet stand firm. So basically he's saying, control your thoughts, and you will not be troubled. What is outside of your mind, meaning what is outside of your control, means nothing to you, right? So at the end of the day, from there, we can decide, hey, I'm in control of my thoughts and I can do that. Thoughts come and go, but I've talked about it before. You can hold every thought captive and you can analyze it and you can ask yourself, where did that come from? Did it come from a place of doubt? Did it come from a place of insecurity? Did it come from a place of negative connotation because thoughts come and go all the time and they're fluid. They're not grounded a lot of the time. And we can, for sure, hold those things captive and ask ourselves, is this imperative or is this good for developing my own character? Is this good for me to, is this good for me for growth? Is this good for me in the long run? And if not, you can throw it out. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you one more quote that I heard just 2 days ago. My upper manager was in our department and he was asking my immediate manager something, and he was just standing around. My upper manager was just standing around talking to us and chatting and stuff, and I was like, oh, hey, what's going on? Hope you're doing well, that kind of thing. And he said something because we got into the topic of hurt feelings and perception, right? And he said this quote, which I think is fantastic. He talked about how his spouse was going through therapy, and he heard this quote from this therapist that said, is this thing that is causing me grief or hurt or pain, is this thing hurting me or is it hurting my ego? That is a good question to ask yourself. Is this thing that is external hurting me as a person, or is it hurting my ego? A lot of times it hurts our ego, and our ego is imaginary. We can decide from that point to move on from that, and we can decide from that point to throw it out. If it's hurting your ego, that may be as fragile as it may be, then we can throw it out because it doesn't have anything to do with developing our character and making us stronger. So with that, my friends, this is a shorter episode, but it was a very off-script episode. I hope that you got something out of this. Thank you for listening and learning with me because, like I said before, in a way, this podcast is a therapy for me. It is a way to get my thoughts out there. It's a way to kind of talk to you for real and talk to you unfiltered in a lot of ways. And it helps to process things. It really helps to process kind of what's going on in my mind and, finding mental clarity and learning myself also. So I want to thank you for learning with me. And thank you, if you stuck around this long, for sticking around the way that you did. And as always, just remember the Latin phrase, sic parvis magna, greatness from small beginnings. Remember your humble beginnings and where you came from. There is greatness in every step, whether you create it or whether you find it in your journey. Never forget those who stood up next to you, who grew with you, and who continue to stand by you today. Tell them that you love them because you never know what tomorrow brings. Appreciate them for who they are. And also, never forget, there's only one you, so be you and be yourself. There's never been anyone like you. There's no one like you right now, and there will never be anyone like you in the future. This is your journey, and no one can tell you who you can and can't be or what you can and can't do. That is for you to decide and only for you. And also, thank you that I get to do this every day. It is a blessing and a half. You've made me the person that I am today. I would not be here without any of you, and you've made my life so much better for it. So I thank you for that. So until next time, my friends, this is Samson Kitty Fox. Thank you for listening, and as always, thank you for your support. And I will catch you all in the next episode. Bye-bye. Bye. Love you. Meow meow.